This is a conversation with Angad Daryani. He is the founder and CEO of Praan, a deep tech startup that's building air purification and carbon capture systems. Angad is a social entrepreneur and inventor, formerly the founder of Sharkbots, Shark Kits, and a former member of the MIT Media Lab. In this conversation, we discuss his journey falling in love with building and inventing things. We talk about the problem of air quality in India, the consequences of it. We dive into the science of air purifiers with filters, without filters. And then we also touch upon his journey as an entrepreneur and the challenges of raising capital. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and effort. So if you'd like to see it continue, do consider making a donation on Patreon or Anchor. You can buy super thanks on YouTube. You can join as a member on YouTube. You can buy gifts on Instagram Reels. If not through monetary channels, and do consider sharing these episodes, leaving your likes and comments, all forms of engagement, they really go a long way. For other forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally.
And now it is no time.
Former Indian President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam once told you, continue to build, don't go back to school, you lose your curiosity. You've been a maker, a builder your entire life. When you were 12 years old, you started Shark Kits, which built low-cost DIY kits that teach you hands-on skills. A few years later, you dropped out of school, you joined the MIT Media Lab. At the age of 15, you started Sharkbots, which built India's cheapest 3D printers. You've built an iPad, which converts English and French into Braille, a low-cost ECG heart monitor, a vehicle that you can control with your hand gestures. You're now the founder of Praan, which builds one of the world's most advanced air purification devices. Let's start here. First question. Why do you think you gravitated towards building things, towards the maker culture at such a young age? Have you had a moment to sit back and reflect on why that love story began in the first place?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I think children in general are curious. And if you expose them to a large number of things, they often find one or two things that fascinate them the most. Fortunately, when I was growing up, I used to watch a lot of National Geographic Channel and Discovery Channel. And so the fascination towards, both animals as well as automobiles was quite high. And I, growing up, heard a story of someone named Dilip Chhabria at the time who used to customize cars in India. And I used to always find it fascinating how someone is, taking a car off the shelf, which you can buy and, Honda produces or Toyota produces, and then make it look so cool and fascinating. And when you're young, you just think that a cool looking car is a fast car and a great car. And so I was very intrigued by a lot of it, and I never understood materials. And I was very curious, how does this even work? How do they make these shapes? What materials do you use to build these things? And so that took me down. Like I always had that curiosity. And then in school was learning science, and I was very good. Like early on, academically I used to do well. And that was also not like, hey, my parents are asking me to study or whatever. It's like, when you don't have a lot of distractions as a kid, your memory is almost photographic, right? So I used to have photographic memory as a kid. So I'd learn it in school and not forget it. Today is a little bit different with all the sleep deprivation, but I think I didn't
have the same distraction, but I never had photographic memory.
Maybe
it's just you.
That exposed me to the world of science and engineering. And in sixth grade, I was competing in an exam called the Homi Bhabha Young Scientist Exams, like a national science Olympiad equivalent in India. And the person I went to study for it, he would often teach physics concepts by building hand models and prototypes to show how this concept really works. And I think I started going home and trying to replicate the things that he was building. Something as simple as, how do you show your lungs and diaphragm working? Like you cut open a bottle, you put like 2 straws, 2 balloons in a plastic bag, and you move it, and it replicates how your body actually works, right? So that got me into a habit of like putting things together. And even when I was younger, there used to be a TV show called Art Attack,
I love that show.
You had Neil Buchanan. I think he was in New Zealand and similarly, we used to only have TV, right? No internet. So I just like whatever he showed in that 1 hour, I would immediately make it after. And so that was like, I used to be used to building things with my hand. Then science was intriguing, engineering was intriguing, automobiles were always on the horizon. And, that's how the
such a nice interplay between science and art. In a TED talk that you gave in 2013, you said that science is my art form. Scientists are artists. But I've grown up in a world where often science and arts or a creative field have been treated as two mutually exclusive fields.
Mm-hmm.
Often when students have to make a choice between a career, they have to pick between science or the arts or a creative field. And it's positioned in a way that you have to pick one and you're giving up the other. And it's a tough decision because I think most people can resonate with the same feeling that you spoke about, that there is a fascination in both science and arts at the same time. How much of a scientist lives within every artist and how much of an artist lives within every scientist?
I think, I had a physics tutor in 11th and 12th grade, and he was this obsessive mathematician and, very weird guy. But one of the things that he said resonated a lot. He said, mathematics is the language and physics is its poetry. Right. And as you learn more physics and engineering, you realize that the same concepts from electromagnetics translates to mechanics, translates to quantum physics, astrophysics, right? So it's all the same things. It's just like different constants, different variables, different form of equation, but it all reads the same. Like F is ma is is the same as E is Q by so like the electric field and the force, acceleration of mass. It's all of them are the same equations in different forms. Yeah. And so I think I always think of an artist or an entrepreneur as someone with the ability to combine a vast amount of unique data points to build something of value. So a good example, Steve Jobs took calligraphy that he learned in college and put it into the computer that he was building, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's very disjoint concepts by themselves, but how does it actually come together?
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to bring back these unique data points when we start talking about your journey with Praan as well. But before that, you dropped out of school around the age of 14 or 15. You've said in previous interviews it was quite toxic. Dr. Abdul Kalam told you stay out of school. I just want to linger here for a moment. What's wrong with the Indian high school system? Why do you think it's toxic? Why do you think it kills curiosity?
I don't know about toxic. I think the rationale is that I think you go to school to learn, not to memorize. Those are two different concepts, right? If you memorize and succeed, but you've never really digested the information that you're memorizing, it's a futile effort, right? That is where my struggle was. I was so fascinated with science and engineering, but what was being taught to me in school was fundamentally like memorize how this is done, not why is it so, right? And that's why, today I love mathematics, but when I was in school, I hated it, right? How can an engineer who wants to build things dislike mathematics? Like it's the foundation to so many things that we do, whether like hardware, software, machine learning, it's like fundamental, right? And so that was always concerning, and it used to be almost embarrassing for me because when I would compete in Olympiads or competitions, I would not do well because those were not questions you had seen earlier, right? Yeah. It required you to apply the knowledge that you have gathered, and so that would be weird that you are, being celebrated in school for your academic performance, but you really realize that you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. And so that hollow feeling is what was quite frustrating to me. And if I would ask questions, it would be brushed away or, saying, hey, you don't need to worry about this. You just do well on your test. And that's really not the kind of person I am. So that was very frustrating. And I said, screw this. I really don't want to go down this bubble of trying to get some fancy report card, which means nothing.
Brave decision at that point, and you said that you learned something dangerous after dropping out of school, which is autonomy, and I find that very, very interesting. I think every Indian kid who grew up in that same period can resonate. I don't know how the education system is now, with that feeling of you're doing well in school, but you have no idea what's happening. Took part in many Olympiads as well, and always performed very poorly, not surprisingly. And interestingly, every subject they taught me in school, whether it was history, geography, economics, in school I hated all of these. But now later in life, when I went back through my own methods, I fell in love with all of them. So I can definitely resonate with it. Let's start talking about some of your work. But before we talk about Praan, I want to define the problem statement. Let's talk about air quality in India. You grew up in Bombay. You grew up with asthma. Every winter, your parents had to take you away from Bombay to a hill station so you could be comfortable. You wanted to play football, couldn't make it to the state team because of endurance and other problems related to your respiratory problems. Taking up swimming to increase lung capacity didn't help as well. You've grown up personally affected by the air quality in India. So let's start here. What is the state of air quality? We've established it's bad. How bad is it?
It's really bad. So when I say really bad, WHO has certain norms which are, designed for what humanity needs to be healthy. And these are, the healthy norms for PM 2.5 are sub 15 microgram per meter cube.
Sorry, can you define these terms?
Yeah, so the unit in which you measure particulate matter or toxic gases in the air is either microgram per meter cube or ppm, ppb, parts per billion or parts per million. So the safe limit is 15 for PM 2.5, and to make it reasonable for the world, people try to push it around to 50 and 100 to make us believe like we're breathing better, but like it's not what the safe limit is actually is, right?
Okay.
So just for comparison, last week in Delhi was a little over 1200.
A bit over 15, I think.
Yeah. So it's definitely not safe for anybody to be in that environment. Children whose lungs are still developing will struggle too. Older people will see lung capacity decrease faster than ever. I think it was Times of India if I'm not wrong, Times of India, Economic Times, one of them, last week said that Delhi air is equivalent to smoking 49 cigarettes a day. And so, there are people who say that breathing this pollution is going to help build immunity. I've never heard this story saying that people who smoke cigarettes are actually building immunity, right? It's the same thing. Yeah. So I really don't think putting yourself in a hazardous gas chamber is building immunity.
Why is it so bad in these cities, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad? In Delhi in particular, it's become quite a religious and political issue as well, especially around Diwali, stubble burning season. But are those the primary factors? What's causing such a high air quality index in Delhi?
Yeah, so I mean, for any place, I think Delhi has few additions to the traditional city. But for any place, if your concentration of population and vehicles and infrastructure is very high, like it is in developing countries, your dust emission is going to be incredibly high in a very small volume of air. And as a result, if you have 100 million vehicles in a city, like 30 million people, you have so many large infrastructure projects, building redevelopment projects ongoing. You have industries around the city, and the norms for those industries on paper read well, but not really enforced. That's going to cause the air to get saturated very quickly with a variety of pollutants, not just one form of pollutant. And as a result, it's not one source, but infinite sources, which will need to be addressed for this problem to get solved. Delhi is in a unique, weird space where they also have stubble burning happening in Punjab, which is coming into Delhi. We know for a fact, through some of our investor network who own farms in the NCR region, they're like, ours is a farmhouse, but we can't go there because they're burning the farms around our farmhouse. It's insane for our family to enjoy the farmhouse that we own. So that's where the source is, and it's too many sources, and many of them are political challenges. Like if you ask farmers to not do this and lose productive time, it's something they can't afford, and as a result, the leaders going to lose their political votes. It's a nuanced engineering problem, and we've been told to defer to IITs because that is apparently the pinnacle of engineering in India. And I'm sure it is, but if the person who you're giving it to year on year has not succeeded, I think we have to see the outcome that the agency gets rather than the title of the agency, right? And And because if it were not an IIT agency and it was somebody else, they would be butchered for not performing, right? So it's evident. It's like something's not working. The people you're entrusted with the responsibility aren't succeeding. And so you have to perhaps give it to other people who are more competent to solve that problem. And then, so that's on political side. And there are other things that, recently got added to a group with, some Supreme Court justices and lawyers and, ministry people and so on. And there's, Sequoia's MD and ACT grants and all these people on a chat on trying to solve it. And it's so complicated. Like people have tried suing the government for the last decade to solve this. But there's like a threshold to... I don't think legal route is the correct route. I think you have to first be a citizen who takes action. So people like us who are privileged to have, engineering prowess, we work in the industry, we have manufacturing capabilities, venture capital, all of that, to build proof cases that this is how it's going to be built and how we can solve the problem. Try to officially engage with leaders in ministry or municipal corporations to say, hey, this is what can be done. It's the onus is ours to spend the money and prove the pilots they're not going to do it. And if at all that works, then you are lucky. They'll consider it. So that's naturally how any government works. It's not isolated to India. And that's why we try very hard to deal directly with the center. And, a lot of these people are exponentially more influential than I am. So they have already dealt with these ministers and, Prime Minister's office, etc., to see how to best address it. So that's all going on. But I think why is it so bad? It's too many things going on at the same time to... so it's not an isolated focus that let's clean the air for the citizens of the country.
Why is Delhi, Bombay unique in this sense? Like you take New York, for example, also a very dense city, right? A lot of vehicles for sure. Maybe San Francisco is another example. And if you start driving 50, 100 miles away, you'll start reaching an agricultural land as well. In fact, New York did see the effect of Canadian fires come through this year, last year as well. So why is it that Delhi in particular it's so bad, or maybe not just Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore, all of these cities. Why is it so much worse in those cities as compared to cities here?
I think New York's density is far lower than Delhi per square kilometer. How many people and vehicles exist? I don't remember the numbers, of course, but you just look around. I think in the street that's down, you'd have, perhaps 400, 500 people in India, whereas we can see 4 people walking right now in New York, right? And it's not just I think vehicular emissions, while at macro scale, yes, they contribute to receding air quality. Simple things like the paint on the wall degrading, right? If you see paint flakes over time, right, that becomes air pollution. The way that dust is dealt with in India, right? It's the way garbage and waste is dealt with, right? We have heaps of landfills around cities in India. So it's a compounded problem due to so many sources, which is why Praan's approach was, very, I wouldn't say the word radical, but very different in trying to address this thing. Assume you have zero governmental support, you have finite capital, and you have to solve this problem. How can we do it?
Is it tough to not get overwhelmed by the immensity of this problem? Your advisor at MIT, Ramesh Raskar, once told you, don't chase rainbows, try to think of the problem, try to solve the problem. But you just alluded to this. It feels like air quality in India is an infinite volume problem. Yes. That I just don't see how a finite volume machine can solve that problem. Is it tough? Is it challenging to not succumb to the immensity of this task, the impossibility of this challenge that you've taken, and not spiral down this dark hole?
I think when you start these things, you don't know what you're getting into. If I knew the things that perhaps I know today, I would have maybe not done it. But the reality is that, the reason to do Praan is not that, hey, I want to build $1 billion company. I think that's a given if we actually build something of value in this space. And of course, there's execution abilities which determine whether we get there or not. But I think the why start this company and do these difficult things is that when we grew up with far more information than our parents' age, right? We grew up with the reality of a bleak future. that the planet is doomed, animals are extinct, water is polluted, food is polluted, hearing people get cancer. That's not a very exciting future to wake up to and work hard towards, right? Previous generations grew up with the idea that all you have to do is build a career, and if you do well, you're gonna have a happy and good life. And I don't think that's the case. Like, how much money do you need today to get rid of that reality? No amount of money gets rid of that reality, right? So Praan is literally an attempt to at least build something that could change that reality, not just for us, but for the generations to come, right? And air quality, or just like, hey, we drink clean water and we try to eat good quality food. Like, we wouldn't tolerate food with carcinogens inside it. So why air, right? We eat 4 times a day. We breathe 22,000 times a day, right? And you're not thinking about the 22,000, samples of things that you're putting in your body, but you're obsessing over the 4 times that you're eating.
What impact would poor air quality have on people's health, both short term and long term?
I mean, PM 2.5 and PM 1, which stand for 2.5 microns in size and 1 micron in size particles, your body is not able to actually stop them. So it directly goes into your bloodstream and starts getting deposited in your organs, right? Now, our body is not designed to deal with this high volume of carcinogens directly in our organs. So it's like directly going to cause you cancers. If when it's going in your lungs, it's decreasing your lung capacity. There are instances where they've shown like lung shrinking, because of the constant pollution exposure. And that, of course, affects your cardiac health, because suddenly you are at risk of heart attack. You're not getting enough oxygenated blood, right? Your the bronchi in your lungs are choked with these particles, very similar to a smoker. When it comes to other risks, like sort of mental health challenges are quite large. So when you see gray skies continuously, it has a direct impact on your brain. So when you live in Delhi and you can look outside and it feels like a smoke chamber all day every day, that's a problem. A good comparison would be winter depression in the US.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your sun sets at 4:30. Imagine instead of sunset, you're seeing like a gas chamber outside all the time, right? There is a risk of accidents. So I remember being in Delhi in January, February, with almost no visibility earlier this year, and your car can literally run into a person or the car in front of you. And if you're driving on the highway, it's a massive risk, right? Zero visibility. So smog at that volume is tremendous health. These are just few. You have eye irritation, you have skin diseases that come out of it. It's a never-ending list, and unfortunately it's a pandemic that's existed for decades, and it's slowly killing people every day. And just because we can't quantify it and it's nuanced, it's getting missed.
I never thought about the psychological impact of just being in a gas chamber 24/7, and linking that to the seasonal depression that you see in these places that get dark pretty early. It's a very interesting point. Thankfully, well, for people who are completely depressed by now, you are building a solution, and I want to start talking about the science behind those solutions. But first, I think what you're building is slightly unconventional, if I may. People are more likely to have heard of HEPA filter purifiers or activated carbon filter purifiers. So we'll start with that. What's the science behind those air purifiers that use filters? How do they work?
So any purifier, water, air, is taking a fluid, it's separating toxins from that fluid, and it's letting the refined air or water pass through it. In case of water, you can use electrical separation, you can have physical separation, like, activated carbon pellets and so on. You have RO filters, UV filters for microbial. So all of these different things, right? In the air, it's no different. It's just that air is less dense. So you're going to have pressure drops and change in the experience when this air comes out. And so what the HEPA filter does is, it's like a ultra fine woven cloth, and it's made in a certain shape so that you can manage the pressure and velocity of the air. As you blow polluted air through it, the particles get blocked by the pores, right? And cleaner air leaves from the side. And then you have layers or sort of standards of HEPA filters like H11, 12, 13, 14, which is medical grade. which has different porosity, volumes, and densities, and as a result, you get different efficiencies from it. That's great for particles. For gases, it's a little more nuanced. The thing is, the activated carbon pellet system doesn't block all gases, right? Like a gas conversion problem is a chemistry problem. It's like if you have volatile organic compounds, which is what these gases are, right? Like formaldehyde, it doesn't react with everything, right? So you have to convert it from one form to the other or react it with something so that the volatile nature of it, is stabilized. So that's what these activated carbon beds or zeolite beds do, is that they try to convert some of these volatile gases and neutralize them and store them in the pellet bed.
You were hellbent on creating filterless air purification systems. Why? What's the problem or limitations with these filtered air purifiers?
So we need clean air everywhere. Most of the spaces we live in, barring our bedrooms, are quite large form. So, we started with the utopian idea of trying to build outdoor air purifiers. And it was very utopian because we didn't really understand how government works and on all of those things. But and it is an infinite volume problem. Then we found engineering solutions to some of those infinite volume problems. But if you want to purify air in very large spaces where pollution density is very high, you cannot afford to change filters every 10 minutes. And you can't afford to change millions of filters every 10 minutes, which means it's an impossible problem then. So to make it possible, you have to figure out how you can use physics. At the end of the day, it's still a particle in the air. To simplify the problem, assume a tennis ball, right? If you can solve it at a larger scale, you can solve it at a smaller scale. The physics remains the same. So idea was, if you can make the technology filterless, you can produce these devices abundantly, using economies of scale. You can deploy them in large common spaces and places where people are, and you at least have a sink for the pollution. And then there's of course a lot of nuance on how many sinks you need, where to place them, what size they should be, and so on, such that you can have a scalable solution. So that's where a lot of Praan's intelligent systems work comes in like computer vision and CFD modeling and automated prediction of how air purifiers should be deployed, how we study like wind, temperature, humidity dynamics. And we've built an AI engine called Edith, which auto solves air pollution in large spaces, right? Because you can't have an engineer for every street or every factory that we service.
I want to explore all of these aspects, but first, to a dumb person like me, the image of air passing through a filter makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the physics problem. How does air passing through a filterless air purifier get purified?
Yeah, so this will do it for particles, not for gases. Gases, you still have to have some kind of conversion.
Okay.
To go filterless, there are only few approaches. One is to do what a vacuum cleaner does, right? Is that you create a cyclone inside a device such that the particles settle to the bottom of the cyclone and the clean air leaves from the top, right? So but that doesn't work for ultra fine particles. So if you have heavy dust, like sand grains or like pieces of a biscuit or whatever, like PM50 and larger in size, you'll be able to separate it with a cyclone. Then cyclone requires a high amount of energy. It needs to be large enough to separate enough amount of air and create a large flow zone for it and so on. But for the other way to do it is to charge particles. Now, ionizers and electrostatic precipitators have existed for decades. What an ionizer does is it takes oxygen in the air, creates a charge. That oxygen suddenly becomes an oxygen radical instead of O2. And it's able to stick to particles or other harmful substances in the air and make it settle down on the floor or stick to the wall or the opposing charged surface. But ionizers are not really like designed in a manner where they're actively removing particles with high volume of air flowing through it, right? And if you want to do that, then you're sort of going at much higher energy levels where you have challenges like ozone, where these oxygen radicals you create instead of O2 form O3, and ozone is not a safe gas to breathe continuously. The electrostatic precipitator on the other side, which is what industries like cement, steel have been using for decades, like building-sized machines with large plates and these spiky things inside which create this charged zone where polluted air flows through it and cleaner air comes out the other side. There is a massive physics limitation there on how do you make it smaller, how do you make it deal with high volumes of air, and you can't keep it in your room. It's not safe, right? You're dealing in hundreds of kilovolts, right? So 100,000 volts. The computer we use is at like 24 volts, right? So how do you take that and make it abundant and safe and put it everywhere, right? So that's where Praan's IP is. What we did is we took the physics of charging particles, miniaturized it in a manner where at very low energy, at very high flow rates of polluted air, and with an automated collection mechanism, we are able to pull in polluted air, charge the particles, separate them from the polluted air, let the clean air leave, and these particles are then automatically dumped into a drawer where instead of having a filter that you change, there's a drawer you empty like a trash can and put it back in, and in 30 seconds it's back to operating.
How do you do all this? I don't know how much you can disclose.
So it's literally what I said. There's a fan on the top. We're using gravity to our advantage. We're pulling in the polluted air, making it flow through what Praan refers to as cores. In these cores, we charge the particles at a very low energy level, just above where ionization takes place. They stick to a surface inside for few seconds. Once that particle is stuck, there's a mechanism which dumps it into a drawer below. And so when it's dumping it, it's turning off that specific core, and there's a bunch of cores. So it's like all happening asynchronously. So there's no downtime in the purification system. And the way this whole system is engineered is that it allows us to use high suction fans despite having a small form factor, such that even if the air is moving quickly, the way the air is spreading through the device allows the air in each of those chambers to move at the right pace so that the particles can be separated with high efficiency. So it's a very hard optimization problem that Praan has solved. It's like if I change my dimensions a little bit, my voltage requirements go up drastically. And if they go up drastically, my ozone emission goes up drastically. If I make it slower, then it's not adding value to the customer. Right? If I have fewer number of cores, my efficiency is dropping. So it's a very hard balancing problem. It took us almost 5 years to figure out how to balance it. And now we take that and we make different sized products and things around it.
Very interesting. I'd never picture, and I don't know if this is the right picture, but I never pictured an air purifier as a processor with cores in it. But that's the kind of the image I got when you spoke about these different cores working together. You brought up all these variables. Let's quickly address them as well. How do those change the design of the product? So let's talk about the size of the room and the layout of the room. How does that make a difference in the air purifier that you're creating?
So Praan today services two sides of customers. One is an industrial business where you have steel factories, food factories, cement, all of these. Chemical is a big customer segment for us. And then on the other side, we have homes and offices. Right. So we have the Mark series, which are our filterless purifiers, large size machines which go on industrial floors. And we have the Hive line, which is in the home office space. In the industrial space, it's not a area volume problem because factories have different heights. There's different processes. Dust comes from specific processes where you can arrest it at the process using this technology. So we are able to do in 1/10 the energy consumption what traditional dust extractors do, and all without any filters and replaceables and consumables, right? So we're literally giving money back to the business. So if your material is expensive, like we today service one of the largest pigment makers in India, right? Their color goes onto Kia cars and Hyundai cars and all of those. That material is approximately $100 per kg, right? So if I'm giving him back 40 kgs a day, right, the device is paying for itself. So there's while we are focused on air quality, the device is turning out to be a useful tool for a business to not just maintain the air quality in their factory, but also improve the efficiency of the factory itself.
There's less operating cost for filterless.
There's just an AMC per year. There's no consumable parts.
Yeah.
It's very transparent. It's telling you how many kgs you're recovering. So you're quantifying the impact. And of course, it's showing you all the air quality and environmental metrics. So it's already better than what it was before. And it's plug and play. So day 0 you don't have it, day 1 you have it. You're not changing your infrastructure to accommodate a Praan device. So it's like it changes the reality for a customer really, really quickly.
And when you buy it, you buy it. There's no like subscription model after that.
No, because in industry, the product degrades over time, right? It's a very heavy industry. So we cannot have a lease model where the product is degrading. Right? What we can have is a pay as you go approach, but they still end up paying more than what they would have. And it makes sense for large industries where they're buying hundreds of units and it's funded by debt. So then it's okay to go down that route.
Okay. Sorry, I distracted you. Talk about the size of the room, the layout, industrial versus commercial.
Yeah. So industrial, it's not a size of room problem. It's a source, how many sources, how to capture it. On the home office side, we only have one product called the Hive. And it's designed for a mean room size of 350 square feet. Goes up to 10 feet in height. And it's currently, if I'm not wrong, the highest clean air delivery rate in the world for its size. Right? So Hive is pretty compact. It's about 2 feet in size. It changes the air 5 times in an hour in a room. Right? And one of the things that you can see is if you go onto any of the other air purifier websites, you'll see a bunch of asterisks next to the rating. If you go to Praan's website, if I say 350 square feet, there is no asterisk next to that number. Right? This is the actual clean air delivery rate. This is the impact you're going to have.
What are those asterisks? What do they?
Asterisks mean that
in these disclaimers
in these idle conditions at this flow rate with this material of dust, they'll say only tested with Arizona dust in this set. And I was like, come on, man! Like no one's going to trust you if you do these things.
Right. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we did the size of the room, the layout of the room. Let's talk about the type of particles and the size of the particles.
Yeah.
How does the design of the air purifier change if I want to capture dust or pollen or carbon dioxide? How do you change that?
So particles are judged on size and material properties. The ones that are hazardous to us are PM10 and smaller. PM 2.5 and PM1, which is 1 micron, are incredibly dangerous. So our machines, of course, cater to all 3, and even larger is easier for us. And then the material becomes relevant because in industrial spaces, a lot of dust is explosive, right? So, we'd not believe, like wheat, for example, some of our favorite chocolates, they have a material called maltodextrin, right? Which is like a sweetener equivalent, extremely explosive material. Some of the chemical and agrochemical companies do agrochemical, especially fertilizer and herbicide. 1 kg of that herbicide will take out 5 acres of land. It's that carcinogenic. So when we work with these companies, we have to ensure that our device is not going to blow up their factory.
Right.
And it's not that our device is the risk. It's just that because those materials by themselves are so explosive, even if you rub it between your hands, it's going to cause a dust explosion. So it's nothing specifically around Praan's technology or device which induces that. So PM, what changes in the machine when you change particle size, etc. So assuming it's a safe-ish material to work with, we have a spectrum. We've worked with some dangerous materials as well. You want to make sure that for lower size particles, you're constantly optimizing the flow rate, the rate at which this pollutant flows through your device, the size of the core through which this flows, the energy level within the core. Because if it's a small particle, you want to be able to have like a much higher capture efficiency and a more energized core so that it's separating smaller particles. But there's, of course, a balance, like you can't be dangerous. If you have a hazardous and explosive particle flowing, you want to have a low energy core. So you don't want to excite the particle further than it, like they have very low excitation energies. So it's suddenly so much more complicated than someone thought, like what's going on. So those are some, like basically optimizing size of core, flow rate, energy level to make sure you can separate different materials and sizes. For gases, it's different, right? So carbon dioxide, I almost never recommend to use a filter or sorbent to remove indoors unless you have zero ventilation whatsoever. if you have the ability to exchange the air from outside to inside, that's the best way to deal with CO2 at a very low cost level. Like a good case of where I would say a sorbent should be useful is few months ago, a call center reached out to us. We like literally jammed hundreds of humans in a building, and it's a very high concentration of CO2 because people are exhaling throughout the day, and it's a all glass building, and there's no like windows that open and things like that. So for them, sorbents are fine because ducting of that size is incredibly expensive to put up, right? Yeah, so these are like edge cases. But for CO2, the best way to do it is to exchange from outside to inside. So take the air from inside and throw it out, and then pull in fresh air and filter that air as it comes in.
When you were talking about the explosive particles, I'm assuming you're just taking in air which has a composite of all of these different types of particles, and then Hive is making that, like identifying which needs to go in what core so that you don't excite the dangerous
No, I mean, it's not able to do it like that. Like we don't have real-time material segregation. It's very hard to do, right?
Okay.
I don't know how to do it, to be honest. Like, because you have theoretically infinite materials. How do you do it? Like a pigment has 50 alternatives. Like, a light pink is different than a purple. It's different than a red. Like it's still in the same spectrum, but the material properties are very different. So I think your question was, how do you like decide what core it goes into? Look, when we're servicing industries, right, we know what material that specific process is dealing with. So if you take, for example, a Nestle that makes Kit Kat, one of our customers, we know that it's cocoa powder and sugar and flour, and so that one station is only dealing with cocoa powder. So that machine is optimized for cocoa powder.
Specialized machine.
Yeah. No, but product is the same. Its tuning is different for every customer. And then if you go to, say, a agrochemical company, they're using a vibro shifter, which is inducing the dust. Now that's only dealing with one chemical or these 5 chemicals that they'll deal with. So we know what we're dealing with before we sell the machine. At home, it's not these explosive materials. It's mostly dust, or, in Delhi, it's like the stubble burning or infrastructure, those are not like hazardous. Like,
unless you eat a lot of chocolate at home.
The cooking is a big concern, right? In India, the sentimental value of the mom cooking, but the exposure that the mom has to hazardous particles is so high, right? It's 1 to 2 orders of magnitude higher than you sitting in your room. Right. So we really push for Hive to at least be installed next to your stove while the food is being cooked. So that is a safer environment.
This resonates with me. My mom had always pushed, whenever we used to look for a house, an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, she used to always ask for a kitchen that has a window or a balcony, or like a nice balcony attached so that she can always open it while cooking. So I can definitely resonate with that aspect. You brought up wind dynamics. How does that change the air purifier?
Big time. So a simple way to, you have Lego blocks, right? So to think about this is, every industrial compound, commercial compound, or residential compound is unique, even though they're next to each other. So what is like polluted air? It's a fluid flowing in an open space which has hazardous particles and gases, right? So you don't care about the entire building or the compound. You only care about the volume where the air is flowing. So in a house, the air does not, we don't care about the specific area occupied by the couch or the TV or the cupboard. We care about the space between all these objects, which is where the air flows. Now, if you take New York, for example, where we had this grid, that grid causes air to move much faster, right? If you take Mumbai city, where the wind conditions are not that high, but the humidity conditions are quite high, the particles become sticky and heavier and all of those factors, right? So wind will always have a it will determine the efficacy of your purification system, because just like everything else, energy and mass has to be conserved, right? So if I remove particles from a specific space, but it's open to wind and other conditions, new particles will flow into that space. Right. So in industrial spaces, we find food factories, chemical factories to be very easy compared to a steel factory or cement factory, which is open on multiple sides. Right. So when you have these kind of open spaces, the way we do it, it's not a plug and play solution. So we are mapping out the pollution dynamics, the wind dynamics. You can literally see your wind flow and particles flow through our simulation and platform, and that's why we know how many devices you need, where to place it, and so on.
What about temperature, humidity?
Humidity, of course. Humidity, in fact, higher the humidity, higher the capture efficiency. Right. But temperature is different. So high temperature, depending, like, so if you're very close to a furnace, will cause particles to rise very quickly because of hot gases going up, right? So blast furnace in a steel factory, a forge, they have carbon black particles or coal, etc., coming out of it. But so that high temperature makes it move really quickly. Lower temperature increases the ability for it to catch fire and catch high static discharges and so on. So all of these parameters determine how safe the device can be and what parameters it should operate in these conditions.
Very cool. I want to talk about marketing.
Mm-hmm.
In a previous interview, you said that you don't believe in spending a lot of time and effort in marketing.
Yeah.
This is similar to a stance taken by this man named Elon Musk. I don't know if the name sounds familiar, where he said that he wanted to build a sexy car with Tesla that people will want to brag about, and that word of mouth will function as their marketing team. Do you think there's a stigma associated with using air purifiers? Is this a product that people don't like to talk about, put it out there in their living room? Is it on fully on display? Was that a mental barrier that you had to overcome?
Yeah, big time. So in fact, if you speak with anyone on the Hive team, which is our consumer product, there's a very clear mandate and narrative. Air purifiers have existed for decades. Why are they not in every room in every home? It's not a money problem, right? Because you can get an air purifier for $70. Right? We spend $70 on the Uber to get here. In India, you spend that much on your phone bill or Wi-Fi bill or whatever. Right? So it's not a and of course it's like, sure, there's stratas of society where $70 is still high, but let's be real. For most of the people in an urban environment, the 5,000 rupees is a fathomable amount, right? Now, the reason why these purifiers are not everywhere is people often relate it to education. But it's not an education problem because people buy products they don't fully understand because they're cool. Right? So think about it as for example, Whoop, right? The fitness band. How many people know what a lot of those parameters mean? They're learning it for the first time, right? But they've still bought that, I think it's $200 or $400 subscription, just so that they want to be part of a club. They know that their friends are benefiting from it, and as a result, they should also want to be. And it's been made aspirational with Cristiano Ronaldo and Tiger Woods and all of these people, right? So the reason air purifiers, I believe, are not everywhere is people don't know if it works. They don't know where to place it. They don't know how many they need because the website says one thing. In reality, the experience is very different. These are these ugly, clunky plastic boxes which you want to hide away when people come to your house. Yeah. Nobody knows what 200 ppm means because it's not a metric we've been taught in school, right? And literally nobody wants to go to Amazon and buy a filter and then open a purifier. And this is a very tall ask for a customer to do this, right? So how do you actually hack this? Praan is very clear that we're solving a really boring problem. And the way to solve this boring problem is to build aspirational products, things that a billionaire will show off and keep in their living room. And the reason I say billionaire will show off is that they have a $100,000 piano or $500,000 piano in their living room. Will they keep our machine next to it and not move it? Right? Suddenly, if you're able to solve that problem, and of course the product has to work and the service and all of this has to hold true, you have gotten over the hump of it being a boring, lame product. Suddenly, it's a piece of art you want to keep in your house and you want to talk about it and show off. Then if you go a step further and say, yes, it will, because it's a cluttered market, we're going to build the best thing that's ever existed, right? Praan is the only company right now using medical grade filtration in the Hive for your house, right? Even the big guys don't do it because it's expensive. And then you go a few steps further and say, we're going to change the entire experience of owning an air purifier, the way you communicate with it, the numbers you see on it. You can literally, because people don't know what 200 ppm means, you pull out your phone on the Hive app, you can see the particles projected in your room and the data is coming from the Hive, right? Our AI platforms that we built for the industrial business have been put into the Hive. So that when you install it, you scan the room, it looks at all like the objects in the room. So your windows, doors, you have a fan, air conditioner, etc. It's identifying it. It knows where it is relative to these objects. And so the feedback or the insight you get from the Hive is specifically customized to that room, right? So it's going to say, open the window to the left for 3 minutes to stabilize your CO2 levels. Nobody else does these things, right? And then you say that once you put it, you forget about it, our team will take care of it, right? It's a very different experience of owning an air purifier. Suddenly, I only care about it being a habit. 97% of Praan Hive users use the product even after 6 months, which is not the case for the other companies in the space, right? And how, like, I think I was just like sharing with some customer, like an investor recently. We don't have like tens of thousands of users, right? But in November, Hive was on through the month for little more than 100,000 hours, right? With existing customers. Many customers kept it on 24 hours a day in Delhi, right? And they were in an AQI of single digit to 10, whereas outside it's 1200. So that completely changes the reality of air purifiers. And I'm not opposed to marketing, but it should not be the basis on which a company succeeds, because that bubble will burst. So the focus has to remain on building the best product or service possible, making people love it so much that they don't buy it once, but they buy it again and again. It becomes a show-off factor to show others. And then please, by all means, you should make great content and you should partner with the right people and be seen in the right places so more people get exposed to it. But I am not the biggest fan of taking a stack of VC money and burning it on performance marketing. I think that's a bubble that will burst the day you stop spending money.
I think that's a very sensible approach. We spoke about the physics problem earlier, but it seems to me equal weight has been given to the design problem as well, and overcoming this mental stigma. You've been inspired by Apple products in the past. Was that your biggest inspiration when you were coming up with the design for the Hive?
So we've been inspired by few companies. Definitely all of us entrepreneurs in the climate space are enamored by Elon's mission and vision and the struggle that he's gone through. And then on Steve Jobs' level and Apple level, I think it was the simplicity and the elegance, which is big, and the focus on excellence, right? Is that how easy can it be and how much can it become a part of the user's life every day? And can it be done in a manner that's not, we operate in India because the pollution problem is there, right? We are still a global company. We're an SF headquartered company, right? And so we want to build the best products in the world, not just in India. So we always look at it from who's built the best hardware in the world, right? Many times we take inspiration from Porsche. Like if you look at the 911 series, the reason that car is exciting is not because it's a status symbol. It's the only flat 6-cylinder car there is, right? All other cars have a V block. Porsche used to have that, I think if I'm not wrong, called H block, where the pistons are moving. Okay, there's no reason that should work, right? But they've mastered it over time so much that it has low center of gravity, and they've that excellence of incremental improvement to get it to so-called perfection year on year. So how many customers complain about a Porsche? You hear complaints about a Range Rover, right? Or a McLaren. I don't know how many people complain about a Porsche 911 not working, right? There's a reason why that is so, right? I don't sure, we're in early days and we're also learning, and product, sometimes has issues or bugs, or not a lot, but, we still see that. And we still want to continue to get to a stage where this product ships to every customer and it works every single time, every day. A lot of customers get it. Sometimes, for manufacturing to work, a million things have to go right, right? And sometimes one nut bolt loose, 10% loose causes a noise issue or whatever. It's just a screw which was slightly loose, but it's still the experience of the customer. So we're constantly focused on that near perfection, iteration, very deep checks. right? A letter here and there is not okay. Right, the manual has been read 50 times to make sure that it's clear. We're constantly improving the setup process. We're improving the acoustics of the device every day. We don't have to do all these things. Still a purifier that works great. But that level of excellence where person will be like, man, they thought of this. I thought of this after using it for 1 year, but these guys had already hacked this problem and addressed it. So that's when someone is a lifetime customer, and that's what we're trying to build towards.
What new challenges come up when you are considering outdoor purifiers as compared to indoor purifiers? Can you just take Hive, put it outdoors, will it work? Or are there any other challenges that you have to think about?
So what is a good air quality? It's where the net concentration of particles or gases in the air when you breathe them for those instances is lower than it should be, right? When you put air purifiers outdoors, you'll capture pollutants. You will not improve air quality. Those are different. And now let's a good example. To explain this simply, like you have infinite number of pollutants, but you're putting these really tiny machines to try and remove these infinite pollutants, and the pollutants continue to get added on. So the amount of pollution you're removing through these purifiers is nowhere. So like the rate of removal is nowhere close to the rate of introduction in an infinite volume problem, right? So that's where the challenge is, that if we put our Mark II series, like which is extremely powerful filterless air purifier, you put in a room, it's like in 1 minute it's clean, right? It's insane. But even if I put 50 of them outside, they'll capture dust very quickly, so the chamber will fill up, right? But will it improve air quality in a large space? No, because there's more and more pollution that will get filled in that space, right? So how do you improve air quality outdoor if you go the purifier route? There's just a physics constraint where the distance between two adjacent buildings needs to be lesser than the height of the two buildings. Like this building and the next one, this is a good proof case. The distance between the two buildings is lower than the height of the building. And if you have enough of these to build a channel, I can certainly improve the air quality in that space. But that's not the case in every city, so you can't do it. So the hack is, of course, to go after the sources, to have bioremediation measures, not plants. Plants don't improve air quality, but like bioremediation measures to remove particles at a high rate. You can't have filter. It has to be filterless solution for large spaces. So like if you have a tiny outdoor restaurant with like a barricade, you can do something there where some air is getting exchanged, but not a lot of it. So more or less still stagnant. Right. So these are like very isolated cases where outdoor purification will work.
So if you have these physical barriers, you can create that microclimate, but large open spaces,
you can't do it.
You can't use?
No, you can't do it.
Life has been a lie.
Yeah. So it's like that's why my mentor, Ramesh Raskar, he's been incredible. I think a lot of the way I look at the world is because of him, right? He looks at large, difficult problems and he wants to solve it in a week. Right. Yeah. He said it doesn't have to I don't have to make 100 million devices in a week. I have to build the one device that proves that it works and then get an operational business that can scale this. That's his belief system. So he is as much an entrepreneur, but not a business operator. He remains an inventor. Yeah. He wants to solve many problems which have humanitarian existential impact, whether it's in health technologies, vision systems, network AI is massive. I think like incubated 300 AI companies this year, some obnoxious number, right? So it's insane for one person to do these things, right? So so that's why I said don't chase rainbows, because it's an infinite volume problem you're trying to solve. What you want to do is make clean air accessible where the people are, right? So humans spend 90% of their time indoors, whether it's office, home, gym, restaurant. Make the air clean there. Factories where there's a cost induced by the pollution on the shop floor. Try to make it a profitable activity for these people to have these devices on the shop floor, right? And it's just compounded over time what we've done. It was not evident upfront. So I think outdoor still remains. I think we should focus on building the right data tools, and we built something called SES, which is spatial and environmental sensor, which will create real-time 3D maps of pollution flow in cities, and you can use it for health insurance and fitness and real estate and all of those. all of our vision systems are pretty strong, where they're able to create digital twins of these spaces immediately and simulate air pollution flow. So it's like these are these things that will add value to the world. I don't know if putting like 100 million devices in New York City will be that value. It'll be more like signaling and marketing than actually solving.
So in Delhi, they had built this outdoor air purifier. The government built, making no difference.
I don't want to because it has repercussions for us, but like the honest answer is even if you take a jet engine and you put in this purifier, you can't pull air from 1 kilometer away, let alone purify it. And they don't have a jet engine in that air purifier that they've put outdoors, a tiny fan. Like imagine, right? We travel by airplanes. Ideally, if we had such a powerful engine, like all the buildings and things would get sucked into the plane, assuming you could pull air from 1 kilometer away. So like, what are you saying? You can't purify air in 1 kilometer radius.
We can skip this question because I don't want you getting in trouble. But if you can, you mentioned earlier that there are some government obstacles as well towards air purifiers.
Yeah.
Is there any light you can shed on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, they don't have an easy problem, the government, right? And I'm not like blaming them or whatever. I think what Elon and is trying to do with the Department of Government Efficiency makes a lot of sense. That in some places, private sector is better equipped to solve the problem than the government is. If it's defense, by no means should like lay people start like building armies and things like that. But like technology, I think we can build better than the government can. So I think the political challenge remains that there is this stack of money that's lying. There's like clean air budgets, etc. I think if I'm not wrong, there's across multiple budgets, little over $1 billion sitting unused in India. In different states, etc., for clean air or associated programs. The thing is that they want to do things which will signal progress, but it's not like it's not a COVID equivalent, right? Like find the vaccine and it'll be fixed, right? It's a multi-pronged problem. It's very nuanced. Like if you look at stubble burning, it's a logistics problem. It's not an engineering problem. I don't expect the government to operate logistics, for example, at the level of a Zepto to be able to solve this, right? The industrial is a regulation problem, right? The regulation exists. It's not being enforced. There is a reason it's not being enforced, right? That is not a problem that even certain ministers have the ability to solve. Because it's always like, hey, the industrialist is interacting with the government in a certain way and there are certain exchanges. So they get leeway in some of the pollution that they do. On the other side, like if you take steel industry, they have complete freedom to pollute today because steel is one of the fundamental drivers of power in the world. China produces 50% of the steel in the world. India is trying to catch up. We're 1/10 or lower, right? If I remember correctly. So the government wants steel industry to grow at any cost. But what is that cost environmentally? So they're doing it for national security and economic welfare, but then there's a huge externality cost by it, right? And if they add regulation to it, the cost of steel increases. It doesn't become viable globally. Like Indian steel will not be looked at the same manner as Chinese steel. So there's like, they are in a catch-22, right? So what is it that they can also do? I think one is to not hide it. Today there's if I remember correctly, earlier this year, like there was some kind of like ban on low-cost sensors. That they don't want people to know this information. That's, I think, not okay. I think you should allow people to measure, talk about whatever they want to. It's like a democratic right to know what you're breathing. I think you need to enforce the use of air purification systems indoors. So like every school should have it, every hospital should have it. It's like, you have your fire and safety check, you should have your air quality check. Someone should be able to come and, land you in a lot of trouble if your air quality is not good. Or you're making people breathe bad air in your office, right? On industrial side, I think they can create incentive programs, right? So if you spend this on this kind of environmental equipment and on random checks, we are ensuring that you're actually complying. Here's your tax benefit, right? So there's no real money cost to the government. In fact, it'll grow the economy, right? Like if we get a lot of business, we pay taxes, we create those many jobs, we run factories, it's adding to the economy, right? So I think these are like things they can do where you'll have an impact. Stubble burning, just gives a couple of, like, and this is actually an ongoing conversation with one of the groups that I'm part of with these government and lawyers and then things like that. Is that, can we get a bunch of grant money and ACT, which is like a venture-backed organization in India? So all the venture capital people have put in a lot of like grant money to donate to certain causes like this. Can ACT finance, the stubble capture activity every year? Because there are companies that can use the stubble, make alternate materials, and actually make money out of it. So it's a stubble logistics problem. There's like, they're talking to the large guys like Delivery and Urban Clap founder and all who are on these meetings. And they're all of us are doing it pro bono. We have no, there's no organization. It's a bunch of like people who know certain things trying to add value. These large companies are saying, hey, I have a CSR budget, we'll pick up the stubble for free. So that's the level at which it's going. So there's like action, there's like the right people talking about these things. I'm very lucky to get invited to be part of this and be the tiniest person in the room in these activities. But so these are some things that can actually help. I don't think putting up random purifiers outdoors or hiding data is going to help solve the problem.
Definitely a good list of actionable items that the government can take. I want to pivot slightly and talk about your journey as an entrepreneur and raising capital as well. You've been quite vocal about the journey. Praan falls under the category of hard tech or deep tech. Silly question. What is hard tech?
So hard tech means you're going anything from, extreme fundamental engineering, mathematics, physics, software, and building products or services around it. So it's not like I'm using a bunch of off-the-shelf controllers and building a robot. A vision system for the robot is hard tech, right? Where they're building algorithms from scratch. Now, again, if you're taking off-the-shelf algorithms, like a good example is like a ChatGPT wrapper for that's not a hard tech company, right? Yeah. I still think it's a software company. It's not even an AI company, right? But like for us, it's like we are doing R&D at the molecular level, which is separating particles, gases. We're building core technology and physics around it. We're building vision systems and machine learning algorithms which can solve air pollution in large spaces. We're taking this technology, putting it into a product, and we're building hardware, software layers on that product. And then we're manufacturing these things. So we're investing in infrastructure, manufacturing. We invested in something like, if you look at a hive, that space gray color, so much R&D went into getting that space gray color to be what it is, and the texture and all of those. So all throughout the stack for us, it's been inventing, exploring, learning. A layperson example would be the company that built the touch screen. Touch screen was the hard tech or deep tech innovation. It going into all the phones, the hardware innovation.
How big is the hard tech industry in India? What's the state of hard tech?
Still early. When we were fundraising, literally nobody. One or two companies who left India and went elsewhere. Venture capitalists thought I was completely retarded. They like, so many of them told me, many of them are investors today. Hey, why are you doing this? Why don't you build like a SaaS business? You guys have a great story, great team. I think you're chasing the wrong thing. I was like, come on, man. It's like 5 years later when your kid grows up and asks you why the air is bad and you run $1 trillion fund, you should answer that question. Right. I told this kid who was solving it to build a SaaS product.
Imagine.
So people thought I was like snobbish at the time or arrogant to say these things, but they understood, and they're very grateful to have many of them be investors today in our company.
If you were one of the first companies, was it hard to find talent then?
Talent is really hard in India, man. We have, we always look at the number of engineers graduating, but you require an immense amount of fundamental knowledge and exposure to invent. This is not jugaad, right? We are like taking physics principles, engineering principles, pushing it to the limit of modern software, simulation, testing to build these products. So you don't need the best talent in India. You need the best talent in the world to build something like
You need
this.
modern day polymaths.
Yes. And each person needs to be a problem solver who cares very deeply about what they're doing. And I don't think no amount of money or equity will solve that problem. It'll always be less, right? There's no cap to what a person would want to make personally. So it's not like a company can pay today, even if I 5x the compensation, right? I will still be, and if I only operate in India, I'll be still be limited by what the market has to offer, right? It's not a money problem. Is it where is and India on the other hand, unfortunately, has a very high brain drain, right? I think if I'm not wrong, 7 lakh people leave the country every year, 700,000 brains leaving the country every year, compounded over 3 decades, ridiculous, right? Um, I was told, early on, we had this investor in Hong Kong, and he told me there's 1 billion people in India, you can't find your people. This was like in 2021. I was like, look, man, and his sentiment is right? And he was motivating me to look deeper. And it was like, now 3 years later, they buy my story a lot more. So we've used every agency. We still have, I believe, the best engineering team in India, but I think we can compound further and build the best in the world. And I think many of the existing engineers are making that journey. They're pushing very hard, right? And which is why Praan has been able to build. It's all the deep passion and desire our engineers have. But I think to go very fast, because it's an important problem for the world to solve. That's where the US-India story works very well for Praan, right? We get to have the best of both worlds. But how hard is it to get talent is incredibly hard. And I think if I were to isolate all business problems, finance, product engineering, customer, I think isolated problem would be the pace at which you hire incredible people and the pace at which your customer base grows. Both of these will determine how successful you are.
You brought up the brain drain. There's a formula in place for young Indian kids who have the opportunity and the privilege of being able to study in the US. Then the formula is you typically do your undergrad in India, you go for a master's in the US, sometimes on student loan, try to land a good opportunity here. You spend the rest of your life here. You visit home once or twice every year. You were faced with the same question. When you were at Georgia Tech, when you graduated, you had multiple opportunities from Meta, Tesla. You said no to it, started your own venture, a very risky hard tech venture, and you went back. How do we solve for this brain drain that's been in motion for decades? You've moved back. How challenging was that decision? Would you encourage other people to do the same?
So I think if it's like there's multiple aspects to it. Okay. It's not just career aspects, right? I think career aspect is an easy one to address, right? Theoretically, if I raise enough venture capital or companies doing well, I'll match the salary someone makes in the Bay Area. People don't move back for salary or don't take a job for salary. Many times it's also the desire to have a certain lifestyle, to breathe a certain air, to be able to travel a certain way. And those problems India may not be able to solve immediately. So I think but at the same time, there is one truth. If you see most people who live abroad, and it's not just Indians, whether it's like Asians who live in the US or Europe, and anyone who's away from home in another country, there's always a sense of worry that I'm too far away from home. If something goes wrong, this time is not coming back. I will not get this time with family. So that is always hovering over a person who's far from home. So when you work for cross-border companies like us, you get the best of both worlds, right? We have factory and engineering and customers in India. We're building the same stuff here. There's a lot of cross exchange of talent. You get to be in both places. You're solving problem for people you care about at home. At the same time, you're getting to work with the smartest people in the world in here and in India. You're learning how to manufacture in India as opposed to China. So there's we're trying to create this ecosystem which gives the person the best of both worlds, right? It sounds too good, and of course we'll have a lot of challenges, and we'll have more learnings along the way. So what is it that India can do? Most people who move back to India start businesses or join family businesses, or they take up a job and struggle and then move back abroad again. The culture of the old work culture is not conducive to intellectual growth in India. Modern startup culture, perhaps. And now because these people may say have worked here, they feel like, oh, I don't want to work for somebody else in India, so let me start a company. And getting a seed round, up to $1 million, not hard. So that's the real story of the workforce in India. So how do we, firstly, my hardest question that I ask everybody is, how do you bridge the exposure gap and the cultural gap for people who already live in India. Because I think they still have the intent to work. They still want to succeed financially. They want to learn new things. The holding back factor for the companies is they don't want to spend 3 years training a person and then they move on and they don't actually add value to the business, right? I think like it's a very complicated problem, but today when Praan hires in India, it hires for intent. When I hire in the US, I hire for capability.
What's the difference?
India, I cannot expect some of those capabilities because those people didn't have the fair opportunity to learn these things in school, right? So those we will train, but I cannot train you on your intent and your integrity and why you show up to work every day and do you work very hard and do you take responsibility. And in the US now, those are a given if we are interviewing a candidate. Otherwise, they don't even get into the interview process, right? We have some proof of exceptional ability or track record. You've shown consistency. You've solved hard problems. I want to talk to you. Then I hard press on skills and your fundamentals. And can you actually own and solve problems? Can I rely on you to engineer the best possible product because you know your fundamentals, right? So this is sort of currently how we hire in India and US.
Also, a big problem we've been only talking about. Well, it's not an infinite volume problem, but infinite problems, I feel. But glad that you're creating this hybrid ecosystem that's partially solving for it. Let's also talk about raising capital. You've mentioned in the past that you were rejected by hundreds of VCs. When you partnered up with Dhruv from the Collective Artists Network, you pitched to a wide spectrum of investors, from angel investors to actors like Deepika Padukone to large VC firms like Sequoia, Matrix, Lightspeed. Almost all VCs passed on you. Interestingly, in a previous interview, you've said that now when you look back on those pitches and those decks, you wouldn't have funded Praan as well.
Yes.
You found it slightly naive, a bit utopic. You mentioned that earlier as well, not based on the realities of the market. What's the scene now? How is the market, if it's changed at all? Are investors more willing to fund air pollution technology now? Has it changed at all?
I think they want to fund Praan. I don't know if they want to fund air pollution technology. And I'm not trying to be like complacent. I'm still very grateful, and this can go away any day. Like we're very, we have to continue to work hard and perform and all of that. I think one of the things that venture capital looks at is resilience. Is the problem large enough? Are they committed enough to solving it? Is there a unique value proposition, and is there a market to pay for it? When you're doing utopian stuff, none of these are answered. Right? So now, if you are in Silicon Valley, perhaps you can swing a couple $1 million with a utopian idea. India is not that risk-taking country, right? It's a risk-averse country. So if I were, I had literally 1 day notice to fly back to India when COVID happened, right? Otherwise, the idea was to raise the capital here, start something here, and be between both countries. Yeah. Just like it's how it played out, and some lessons had to be learned. So I'm glad it happened the way it did, right? I think Indian risk capital is increasing for deep tech. They realize nobody pays for software, right? In India, deep tech will create paradigm shift. The same investor who told me run a SaaS business wants to invest in Praan as a hardware company or a deep tech company. I haven't pitched them. Right. So it's a shift happening in the market. People are understanding it. India lags the US by one fundraising cycle. So what that means is venture capital investors in the US have seen exits. Indian venture capitalists are beginning to see exits or IPOs. The first time it's happening. Right. So when that happens, there's a trust that I can make money by taking ambitious bets. Suddenly you want to take bigger bets. If you've never had it like it was when I was beginning to fundraise, everyone's just trying to do things that they understand. Nobody wants to do crazy things. To do crazy things, you should have succeeded at doing a crazy thing. Right? So I don't blame them, but at the same time, because it's also the LP who gives the money to the fund, dictates the risk-taking ability of that fund. Right? So if the LP is that, hey, I want like extreme control and I don't want to take crazy risk, what is the VC going to do? At the end of the day, he's a fund manager, right? If it's a billionaire putting his own money, it's fine. right? He's like, this is the money I'm willing to write off. So it's just like once you go deeper, you understand that it's not the person who was being difficult to you. He has a certain fiduciary duty. And if his investor is not allowing him to take crazy, ambitious, bold risks, then that's the reflection on the investor, right? And most, like I've met with massive families who are LPs in big funds. You meet them and you understand why the fund is the way it is. It's old school money. They've inherited it from previous generations. They have polluted the world the way they've polluted. So recently, you know, they're a very nice family. By the way, the people I'm talking about, and they offered to invest in Praan, one of the largest industrial houses in India, right? They brought in their vice president of technology or whatever to evaluate Praan in our office. And the guy kept going on about like, hey, the world is going to pollute XYZ. I don't know if this is going to work, etc. Told him, you bought my product, right? 50 others bought the product, right? It's not zero. I have to get the 50 to 5,000. It's not nobody's buying it. It's like it's always going to be a trail till you create enough FOMO and value proposition in the market where everyone needs it, right? So Praan will always take a multi-prong approach is to go after the biggest names, which we do, get them to be passionate users and scale with them. That solves the revenue problem for venture capital and investors, right?
Yeah.
You cannot be negative that just because things have been done this way, they'll always be done this way. I was like, if you're going to come with this belief, please keep your money. I don't want to talk, I don't want to be in business with you. But you have to try to build the future. You may or may not succeed, right? But at least you have to try to do the right thing and build the right tools and technology and business that allows it.
In 2021, you wrote a blog titled Swimming with Sharks, where you spoke about navigating sharks in the industry. How do you decide, especially at a point where you desperately need capital, how do you decide what's good money in quotes, and is it challenging to say no to certain investors?
I mean, it is. Last year landed in a lot of trouble for saying no to one of our own investors because the terms would not have been right to every other investor, right? We do rounds. The idea of a round is that the terms are same for everyone. My own family's investor are the same terms as every other investor, right? So why will I give special treatment to somebody? Everybody's important. Like everybody has the same intent. They want to see us succeed. We have fiduciary duty to multiply everybody's money, not just one person's money, right? I think over time I've realized that taking the wrong capital is going to make the journey less about the mission and more about the person who's giving me this capital, right? So I don't want to focus on one bad investor. I want to focus on solving air pollution and reversing climate change. So if I'm not able to, there is no option of taking bad money. It's equivalent to that option doesn't exist. That money has never been offered. Right. So when you go to raise from the market, today when I'm raising a Series A, I'm talking to 10 people, not 100 people. I want money from one of these 10 people along with existing investors because one of these 10 people will accelerate Praan. It's clean money, good money. They've built large, valuable businesses. That's all I care about. Because then they will judge me on the right metrics. They'll push me in the right direction. They have helped a company like Praan in some other industry scale. They have gone through that journey. They will not ask me nonsense things which, cannot be proven or, chasing rainbows commercially. Or I can't go for the obnoxious SaaS growth as a hard work. Like we still have to build factories and do things, right? So they'll ask the right questions, challenge us the right way. So all of those factors. So I think bad money is not an option. If it's offered, just assume it's not offered.
What does it take to become a good entrepreneur? You've spoken about getting rejected by every college you applied for, even MIT, despite working at the MIT Media Lab. At Georgia Tech, when you were graduating, you had all these opportunities at Tesla and Meta. You decided to start your own venture. We spoke about getting rejected by all these VC firms, pitching to so many investors. If you want to be an entrepreneur, do you need to have dominant traits in risk-taking ability, high tolerance of pain and rejection, swallowing your ego, facing rejections?
I think you cannot have an ego to begin with.
Yeah.
I think if you're really, I don't think you should start a company for the sake of starting a company or to make money. Please don't do it. It's too painful. You will not only mess up your personal sanity, but your family relations, everything. It's not worth it. So, what's definition of risk? What do I lose today by doing this? The only thing I lose is so-called sanity, time with friends, or a balanced life, or whatever that may mean. If I were not doing this, I'd still be curious to be doing something else or challenging myself in a workplace or taking on hard projects. It's who you are as a person, right? So what was the risk when I did it? I was fortunate to get into a good college. I went to Georgia Tech. If Praan didn't work out, the worst thing I would have is a degree from a top 3 college. What do you lose? Right? I can pick up or take up any job, even if it's not the fancy Tesla or Meta. Even if I work somewhere else, it'll pay the bills. What do you lose? Not doing this and living with the reality that I could have done something or at least tried to do something, and it's okay to fail. If I didn't do it, that would always hover over you, right? What if? I don't like living that way. So and it's very important. It's affecting your own family, and if you have the capability to do it and the downside is capped, the upside is uncapped, right? What I think Naval describes it as an asymmetric opportunity.
Right.
So if that's the case, you should do it by all means. Whether you drive a Toyota Corolla or you drive a Porsche, after a point it doesn't matter. Right? There's so many people I know who are ultra wealthy, and they said, they're not driving fancy sports cars or taking private jets. He said it doesn't matter. You'll do it the first 5 times. After that, you have to have the right reasons to want to do this.
Interestingly, you mentioned, I think some people might have considered you snobbish when we talk about hard tech and raising capital, and you rejected a certain amount of investors. You mentioned not having an ego, but I feel like you do have to walk a fine line in having the audacity of even thinking of this idea and then believing that you can take it and you can walk this path all the way through despite all the rejections and despite everyone telling you you can't do it. You need to have some level of ego and audacity, I think.
I think it's again, I don't think it's ego or audacity. It's resilience.
Okay.
Right? I still don't know, after all our traction, is Praan going to be successful or not? I don't know. And when I raise money, I tell people this is money you should be willing to lose. It's not like we are wasting it. I told you earlier, we're very frugal. We have 36 months of runway despite not having fundraised so much, right? We're careful with our capital. But you have to be honest. I'm going after this really difficult thing. I may or may not succeed. I will do everything that it takes above board to try and succeed. If it doesn't work out for whatever reason, I'm sorry, you're going to lose this money. But I'm committing my time. I'm committing my own family's money, who's not an investor, to show conviction that I think this should work. Right? Over time, sure, we feel like we have de-risked the business continuously to today, where I feel comfortable putting even larger amount of, taking more money from family and putting it, because I think it may work. Right? But I still don't have the 100% commitment. I can tell anybody, even to myself, that this is always going to work. So if you are a risk, the dictionary definition of venture capital is risk capital. Don't do it if you're not willing to lose the money.
Okay, I won't do it if I'm not. If I'm not willing to risk the money. I think all of this is fascinating, and I'm glad you're on this path and facing all these different challenges along the way. Quite happy that you're there solving this problem. Before we move into some closing questions, I would love it if you can tell me what masterpiece I've built with the Lego. What do you think this is?
What do I think this is? This looks very much like the Praan Mark II.
Exactly what I was building.
Yeah. With our filterless core and the 2 fans. This is a company or an industry like a factory. Is it one of those?
It could be. I wasn't building anything in particular, but if it looks like an industry and a Mark II purifier, that's exactly what it's meant to be.
Sure.
Let's go into some closing questions. What are some books, movies, role models that have strongly influenced you? in your life?
I think role models I told, like, of course, in my own family, like my grandfather, he was an immigrant from Pakistan, like, during the Hindu-Muslim separation, he had to come to India. Grew up, he didn't come with much, but it was to be able for us to be, comfortable and to all be educated and all of that. Like he's had a very difficult journey as an entrepreneur. So that's great. My father, only entrepreneur and only kid who literally went on scholarship abroad to study, lived alone. Used to work as a security guard, etc., to be able to pay, college fee, etc. It's a difficult job, right? And to come back to India and work with his brother and build, one of the largest power backup companies in India, entirely bootstrapped. They've never raised external money, never lost money in a year, right? So they grew very slowly, but they built value on their own. So this great. Of course, then you have your North Stars. You have like the Elon Musk and the Steve Jobs of the world. I think I look at different people for different things, right? There's no like hero per se, because that when you meet that hero, and especially in the startup world, you end up meeting your heroes. Right? I was very lucky to meet multiple heroes through my early days, like Ratan Tata and APJ Kalam, etc. So I think you should. I'm not a big fan of meeting your hero, because then that person's no longer where you hold them to be. Yeah, but I think you have North Stars. That these are people who build things that matter in the world, and lots to learn. Then books. I read a lot of non-fiction, and sometimes people are like, how do you, do intense day and then intense book or whatever? It's like I seek clarity, and sometimes clarity comes from experience. Sometimes it comes from other people's experience. So I read Naval many years ago when the book came out, right? And I think the way he summarizes things is incredible. He gives clarity. Of course, one of the favorite books of all time is The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz. Um, I've read some, like I have a very close friend, Deepak Ramola. He's a actor, lyricist, now runs a lab between MIT and Stanford. He traveled with like Syrian refugees, collecting life lessons, and wrote a book called The 50 Toughest Questions of Life. Very meaningful, 2-page anecdotes. I remember reading that book in like 6 hours and texting him, "Dude, this is insane." Right. So that's again, incredible book. So it's more along these lines, not so much about entrepreneurship or business. It's like clarity. Which is
Movies.
I watch a lot of things. I don't watch every day, or don't get so much time now, but definitely like the engineer in me is a Marvel fan. Watch all the Iron Man and Avengers movies. Then there's, of course, I watch Bollywood movies off late. I'm not a big fan of some of the stuff that's coming out, but with family, I still grew up in Bombay.
Yeah.
And couple of these guys are investors in our company, so very much active on social media with a lot of these people. One of the greatest movies I think is The Intern and The Pursuit of Happiness. Great movies.
What kind of a legacy do you want to leave behind?
I'm really I don't know about legacy. I think I want to leave with the piece that the future is exciting for people, right? And you did more good than consumed when you were here.
You mentioned earlier that our parents have grown up with the prospect of an exciting future, but most of us have grown up with the prospect of a bleak future. You brought up Marvel. I'm going to channel Doctor Strange from the Avengers movie. Let's say I ran a simulation of this world 1,000,000 times. How many times do you think we end up with a favorable outcome? What is the probability that we get our act together in 20 years if we had a good spot?
Probability is low if you just ran it as simulations.
How low?
Right? I think it's going to be isolated to single digit. But humanity has been great at forced adoption. Like we adapt to the problems or the temperature changes or the world around us. So whether we do it preemptively, which was 5 decades ago, whether we are doing it slow responsively as we do today or aggressive responsively as we'll have to do 15 years from now, there's no option. Like, what is the alternative? Like, while SpaceX may get to Mars and they may take few hundred or 1,000 people to Mars, it's 8 billion. What are you going to do? Solar is an option. Nuclear is an option. I think energy will be solved. I think air, if you make it aspirational enough and many of us do it, it can be solved. Water is being solved. So many desalination, water purification companies. Carbon dioxide emission, I think the iceberg problem, sea level rising will be a reality. I don't think we can capture as fast as we emit, even though I run a carbon capture company. So, but I think it's imperative that we do it, right? So some of the expected fundraising cycles we are going to do are going to be obnoxious. But it's imperative that it happen. Not for our valuation or to position the company a certain way. It's like imperative for humanity to have this ability. Right? So whether it's us or some other company, like 15, 20 of us need to be able to do those things.
Okay. Very uplifting.
Yeah.
Final question. What is the meaning of life, Angad Daryani?
I'm too young to be able to I'm 26. And so while I've been fortunate to have a lot of different experiences and input, I'm always conflicted between chasing a vision and knowing that in grand scheme of things, it may not matter. So that's a personal internal conflict. I think when you study quantum physics, it's like you start questioning a lot of things that you're doing. I think meaning of life is going to we remain like to constantly be curious, to experience new things, to adapt and to learn while you're here. So I always like nowadays I'm never like anxious of things not working out. I was like, it's perhaps in that simulation it's meant to go this way, and then there's a better outcome or a worse outcome, mostly better outcome that's on the other side.
I like that meaning.
Yeah.
Be curious, learn new things, and the simulation you are on, it's destined to be. Angad, if people want to connect with you, find out more about you, find out more about Praan, what is the best way to find out?
I mean, our website is pretty shitty, but like it stays updated every few months. It's like it has a way to message me. Pretty active on most social media. LinkedIn is best, or Twitter a little bit. And then Praan, of course, praan.io. You'll see the filterless air purifier thing as soon as you open it. If it's not filterless, it's not us. So, yeah.
That is the way to confirm. Angad, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me.